Welcome to The Explainer. You know, every single business out there has to answer one huge question. What's coming next? And we're not talking about gazing into a crystal ball here. We're talking about massive, high-stakes decisions. Like, how many iPhones should we make next quarter? Or should we bet the entire company on a new factory that won't even be built for 5 years? This, my friends, is the world of business forecasting.
So, how do they actually pull it off? Is it all just down to a CEO's gut feeling, a lucky guess? Well, while intuition definitely plays a part, you just can't run a modern business on hunches. The real answer is a process, something way more disciplined, way more scientific. Because let's be real, hoping for the best is not a strategy.
Okay, so let's get this straight right from the get-go, because it's a huge deal. On one hand, you've got a prediction. That's your hunch. It's personal, it's intuitive, and honestly, you can't really build a reliable process around it. But on the other hand, you have a forecast. Now that's a scientific method. It uses past data, it uses a clear model. One is an art form, the other is a science you can build an entire company on.
So here's the game plan. We're going to really dig into that difference between a prediction and a forecast. Then, we'll look at how companies plan for completely different futures, the long term versus the short term. We'll also see how they keep those forecasts from going off the rails. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with your final takeaway.
All right, let's dive into our first section. We're really going to nail down this foundational idea. Why is it so absolutely crucial to separate a simple hunch from a real, testable hypothesis?
So here's the core of it. A prediction might be right once, but it's a one-off. You can't count on it. A forecast, though, is a system. It's something you can document, you can program, you can hand to anyone in the organization, and they'll get a consistent result from the same set of data. See the difference? It's about building a reliable machine, not just hoping for a single moment of genius.
Okay, so if forecasting is a science, how do you actually use it? Well, think of it like a toolbox. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hang a picture frame, right? You got to know which tool to pull out for which job. And the biggest question you have to ask is about your time horizon. Are you planning for next quarter or the next decade? Because the way you forecast sales for a product launch next month, where you have tons of data, is completely different from how you'd forecast the market for some wild new AI technology that doesn't even exist yet. One looks at history, the other needs a totally different kind of vision.
So let's start way out there, on that distant horizon. We're talking about the huge strategic bets, deciding to build a new factory, jumping into a brand new technology, or expanding to a new country. For these kinds of decisions, any historical data you have is probably useless, or it doesn't even exist in the first place.
So, if you've got no data, what do? You just guess? No way! This is where this brilliant thing called the Delphi method comes in. Instead of just throwing darts in the dark, it creates a system for gathering and, more importantly, refining the hunches of experts. It knows that for these huge, long-term decisions, expert opinion is your best asset, but it gives you a framework to make that opinion so much more reliable.
The process itself is just fascinating. It all starts with a neutral coordinator who sends out specific questions to a panel of experts. And here's the kicker. They're all anonymous. That anonymity is so key because it means some big-name expert can't just bully the whole group into agreeing with them. After round one, the coordinator crunches the numbers, summarizes the results, and sends it all back. Now, each expert gets to see where they stand compared to the group without any ego involved, and they can revise their forecast. You repeat this whole cycle until the answers stop changing, until they settle into a stable, powerful consensus. It's just a really clever way to turn a whole bunch of subjective voices into a single, much more objective forecast.
Okay, let's bring our focus in from the telescope to the magnifying glass. How do we forecast for the short term? Now we're talking about the real nitty-gritty operational stuff. Next month's production numbers, this quarter's inventory levels, how many people to have on staff next week. And the big difference here? We finally have data to work with.
One of the real workhorses of short-term forecasting is the moving average. And the idea behind it is beautifully simple. If you want to forecast demand for, say, April, you just take the average of the actual demand from the last few months, like January, February, and March. It's basically a logical, data-driven peek in the rearview mirror to see what's probably just up ahead.
And you can see exactly how this works right here. To get our forecast for April, we just average the demand from the 3 months before it, and we get 200. Simple enough. But here's the moving part. Once April is over and we see the real demand was 208, we can make a new forecast for May. We just slide that 3-month window forward. We drop January's old data and add in April's new data. Now our forecast updates to 203. It's this simple, elegant system that's constantly refreshing itself with the latest info.
Now, even though this method is simple, you have to understand its personality. Because it's based on the past, it's always going to lag behind a trend. If sales are shooting up, the forecast will always be a little too low. It also smooths everything out, flattening all those natural peaks and valleys in your data. But that's not a flaw. It's a trade-off. You're choosing simplicity and stability over perfect split-second precision.
Which brings us to a really critical reality check. No forecast, whether it comes from a panel of geniuses or a simple average, is ever going to be 100% perfect. So, what do you do when the plan and reality inevitably start to drift apart?
Because they will fail. That's a guarantee. The future is just too uncertain. A new competitor pops up, a supply chain snaps, some global event changes everything overnight. When that forecast is wrong, you can't just throw your hands in the air. You need a system for dealing with the air.
And that system is called forecast control. It's pretty much just the process of constantly checking your forecast against what actually happened. And the goal isn't to get a perfect score. That's impossible. The real goal is to make sure the error, that gap between your plan and reality, stays inside an acceptable, predictable range.
And this is the powerful, simple idea at the very heart of it. You monitor the error. And if that error gets too big, or it's consistently off in one direction, that's not just random noise, that's a signal. It's a signal that the world has changed, that the basic assumptions your forecast was built on are now broken. And that means it's time to go back and fix the system itself.
So, after this whole journey from gut feelings to hard data, let's boil it all down to the final, most crucial takeaways.
Okay, so here's what you really need to remember. First, forecasting is a science, not just a guess. Second, the right tool always depends on your timeline. For the distant, unknown future, you need methods like the Delphi to structure expert opinion. For the day-to-day stuff, you use data-driven tools like moving averages. But maybe the most important lesson of all is that no forecast is fire and forget. You have to constantly monitor and control your system, because the only thing you can truly guarantee is that the future is going to surprise you.
Which leaves us with one last, big, provocative thought. All of these methods, in one way or another, rely on patterns from the past to see into the future. But what do you do when you face a future that is truly unprecedented? A future where the past is no longer a reliable guide? Well, that is the ultimate challenge of forecasting.